welcome to the Let's Talk Kids Health Facebook Live Show, Episode 6. I'm Dr. Narissa Bauer, your host. I'm a behavioral pediatrician and blogger of Let's Talk Kids Health. The concept of this show is to disseminate information about behavioral health and wellness for children and family. Every week, I plan to bring you topics and guests to help me advance this mission so that we can all talk together. So remember, if you're watching this live, you'll have the opportunity to ask questions of my guests and post comments. The replay will be available immediately when we end the broadcast. I would love it if you could share it with your friends. If you don't want to miss future episodes, or maybe check out the past ones, subscribe to my YouTube channel and follow my blog Facebook page, Let's Talk Kids Health. So now, this week's guest. Dr. Damon Korb is one of the country's leading behavioral and developmental pediatricians. He is the founder of the Center for Developing Minds in California and the author of the sanity-saving book, Raising an Organized Child, 5 Steps to Boost Independence, Ease Frustration, and Promote Confidence. His best-selling and award-winning book is the modern guide for helping parents promote executive function skills with their children. He's also the father of 5 kids. Dr. Korb is a frequent speaker who has been featured on NPR Here and Now, The Today Show with Hoda and Jenna, Parents Magazine, The Washington Post, The New York Times, SiriusXM's Dr. Radio, Good Housekeeping, OprahMag.com, and various national news outlets. Basically, he's everywhere. We are so lucky to have him on this show. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here today.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Good morning to you if you're in California, and good afternoon to you if you're on the East Coast.
Yes, I am so excited. So thanks again for joining me, and what a treat. I got to talk to you yesterday too.
Yep, we've been busy.
We have. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in. So what are executive functions, and how can parents explain this concept to a child?
So executive functions are what fuels our functioning. What fuels our competency. It's so integral to how we behave and how we learn and everything we do. So what we're talking about is our ability to plan and our ability to organize and our ability to shift flexibly from one thought to the next. It's our self-control. Mm-hmm. And usually the definition includes working memory, but I like to say that the working memory drives the executive functions. The working memory, what that is it's your ability to do more than one thing in your head at a time. And so in order to take perspective, in order to plan, in order to show insight or get the big picture, you have to be able to do more than one thing in your brain at a time. And those are the skills that parents can start nurturing when kids are infants all the way up through adulthood.
Yeah, that's great. And, I think if you had to explain it to a child you're seeing in the clinic, what are the words that you use?
I usually say that your brain has to do 2 things at a time.
Yeah.
That you have to think about what I'm thinking while thinking about what you're thinking in order to deliver the right message.
I love that. Simple, and it's easy to understand. Well, so how about this next question? So, everybody wants to know, how do you actually nurture executive functioning skills in children?
So this is really what my whole book is about. What I talk about is there's 5 steps that you can use, and it's the same 5 steps whether you have an infant, a toddler, a preschooler, a school-age child, a middle schooler, a high school student. It's the same 5 steps. And those things are to be consistent, introduce order, give everything a place, practice forward thinking, and promote problem solving. And those 5 things, of course, they're going to be applied differently. They're going to look different at different ages, and we can go through and talk about some of that. But it's those same 5 steps to fall back on when you're feeling lost as a parent, no matter what age your child is.
Can you maybe walk us through, an example of, teaching order?
So let's talk about introduce order. So that's step number 2. With introduce order, from the time a baby is born, we pick them up and we cuddle them when they cry. We feed them when they're hungry. And if we do these things consistently, they learn this cause and effect relationship. It's the first sequence they get. And they learn it quickly. By the time they're 6 months old, they're playing with cause and effect toys. They push a button and they know that the bell's going to ring. So they understand a sequence by the time they're 6. We start training young, right? Because that makes a difference. As they get older, we teach them that everything has, everything has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So you take out the toy, you play with the toy, you put away the toy. You prepare the meal, You eat the meal, you clean up after the meal. You take out your toothbrush, you put the toothpaste on it, you brush your teeth, then you put the cap back on it and put it away. For kids who are disorganized, they don't get that. They don't see that sequence. They go, "Oh yeah, I brushed my teeth," but there's a mess and a disaster in their wake. And so we have to teach that everything has a beginning and a middle and an end. And as they get a little older, time is a sequence. Time becomes a really difficult and important concept for people to learn. Your parents make the mistake all the time when they say 5 more minutes. And that's to a kid who's learning what time is. And if you say 5 minutes and show up in 20 minutes, all of a sudden you've just blown their concept of time. So it's really important, and we skip step one, but to be consistent in the way that you're teaching order, in the way that you're teaching space and everything, but to be consistent about the messages that you're teaching.
Yeah. So can I ask you, going back to your example about the toothpaste and toothbrush, like, does that mean that if a parent comes upon their child's, bathroom and sees that mess, does that mean that they've failed?
Does that mean that the parent has failed?
Yes.
It
Like,
doesn't mean
oh
that the
my
parent,
gosh.
no, when you're parenting, you're running a marathon.
Yes.
Right? Your goal is to have these kids ready to launch by the time they're 18. And if you expect them to do everything right along the way, you will feel like a failure.
Hmm.
But it's not realistic. I mean, nobody does that. And the kids are going to make mistakes. So what that is that's a teaching opportunity. Hey, we haven't learned the whole sequence of brushing our teeth. We need to go back and reteach that to make sure they understand the whole sequence, includes putting the cap on and putting the toothpaste away.
I love that. I think it's, everyday moments, but we also as adults sort of take that for granted. But the fact that you're just saying that again, it reminds us that, oh my gosh, that is a sequence. How simple.
Right.
Like,
And as they get older, we start talking about step wisdom. So learning that every task has steps in it. So when
mhm.
they're given a big homework assignment, can they break that down into steps?
Yep.
Or do they just see the end product? You want to teach your kids how to see the steps that are inherent in everything that exists, so that to make life more simple.
Yeah. And going to that, I can imagine that children who can't break down the steps or that only see the end product and get overwhelmed, they just don't even know where to start. And
They
so
overwhelmed.
yeah,
They skip
frustrated,
steps.
yep,
It's a struggle.
yeah.
And here's the trick. So you can see how introducing order is the same rule, but you can apply it over time. As
Hmm.
your child gets older, you just expand upon it. But it's not just age dependent. It's really development dependent. Because I've got 14-year-olds who have the organizational skills of a 7-year-old, and I've got 14-year-olds who have the organizational skills of an 18-year-old.
Hmm.
And if you're holding your 14-year-old with an organizational skill of a 7-year-old at a 14-year-old standard, you're going to be disappointed. They're going to be frustrated. You have to really kind of figure out where your child is in that continuum. Are they at beginning, middle, and an end? Are they at step wisdom? Where are they at? And push them from that level forward.
Yeah, I think that's beautifully said because I think that's where some families get really tripped up is because that child is 14. He should be a
Yep.
14-year-old.
You should be a 14-year-old.
Yeah, but that there's uneven development there.
In everyone.
Yes, yes. So that's a good reminder. Thank you for that. All right, well, let's talk about then what does it look like? We started talking about this, but can you give us more examples? What does it look like when a child has a breakdown in executive functions, and what can parents do?
So a breakdown could look like forgetting. A breakdown could look like boredom. A breakdown could be messy rooms. So let's talk about boredom. Boredom is a problem to solve. So step 5 is solving problems. And these days, parents rescue kids from boredom. They don't allow them to practice being bored. And it's an incredibly valuable skill to have because boredom can exist everywhere. But instead, if we're at a restaurant, we have a 10-minute wait, we hand them our phone. They don't have to be bored. They have TVs that have 2 million channels on it, and they can surf the internet forever. There's so many opportunities. We overschedule our kids. Let them go in the backyard and play and figure out what to do with a rock and a stick. Let them figure these things out because that's a good problem-solving exercise. So anytime your child says that they're bored, you say, okay, great. How are you going to solve that? How are you going to figure
I
that out?
I love that script because I hear that a lot, a lot. You
Yeah,
know,
it's true. We all do it.
I know, and like for instance, going on a long car ride. oh my gosh, my iPad's gonna run out of battery. Oh my gosh, there's no Wi-Fi. And then I hear myself saying, well, when I was a kid,
Right.
we
When I
would
was a
just
kid,
sing songs. We would look
count tumbleweeds
outside.
and
Yeah. Yeah. So it's so different nowadays, isn't
Mhm.
it?
It
And
absolutely is.
and I love that. Can you repeat that phrase again so people have that in their pocket? Like
Which for
in response to, I'm bored,
oh
help.
yeah, what I say is great. How are you going to solve that? How are you going to solve that problem?
So step number 5.
Step number 5. Now problem solving is not easy.
No.
And some kids are lost, and you can scaffold problem solving for them if they struggle with that. So for example, if you know your child is lousy at solving boredom, what you can do is sit down with them when they're in a good mood and make lists. You can make lists of things they can do on a rainy day. You can make lists of things that they can do when excuse me, when they have a friend over. You can make lists of things that they can do when in their backyard, and ideally they participate in these lists more and more,
Hmm.
but in the creation of these lists. But you can have these lists, and if they say they're bored, you can say, oh, well, why don't you go look at one of your lists?
Yeah.
And that usually goes across better than saying, well, why don't you do this?
Yes.
Because now you're telling them what to do, whereas the list, it's their list. You didn't come up with that idea. You're not telling them what to do.
Yeah, a frequent thing that I often recommend to my clients in practice is that I hear this a lot, like, oh, I'm in the middle trying to do my work. E-learning doesn't take all day, so they're bored. They're
Mhm.
constantly trying to interrupt me. So I have recommended that they do something similar, but in addition to either a list, especially for the younger kids, is to write the ideas on a popsicle stick and put it in a jar. And
Oh,
then
that's
that
funny.
way they could sort of pull it out and say,
Uh-huh.
oh, I'm going to do this one next. So just a little, different twist on that.
Yep, that's cute.
Yeah, for the younger ones.
Mhm. And
So
I like popsicles.
yeah, who doesn't like a good popsicle?
Mhm.
So anyway, the other thing that parents are struggling with a lot is screens, right? Managing screen time. We sort of talked about this last night on the other show that we were on, but like, what advice do you have about managing screen time, especially for kids with executive functioning challenges?
So I talk about the need tos and the want tos. There's things in life that you need to do, and there's things in life you want to do.
Hmm.
And the want tos are great. I'd love for my kids to have all the want tos that they want, but they have to get the need tos done first. And so, for a middle schooler and a teenager, the need tos really are to take care of their what I call the 4HS or our 5Hs. I'll show you why. They got to take care of their health,
Okay, health.
exercise, sleep, nutrition. They
Uh-huh.
got to take care of their hygiene, wash their face,
Hygiene,
shower,
very
put on
important.
deodorant.
Yep.
They got to do their homework. They
Yep.
got to do some household chores, and they got to have, this is why it's an H, but have social interaction. They got to have, one of my patients said, I should say it's hella fun with their friends. Um, but they got to have social interaction. If they're doing those 5 things, you've got a forward thinking kid. And that's number 4. Step 4 is forward thinking,
Yeah.
thinking ahead. But those 4 H's are what they need to do. And if they're doing that, then you don't have to argue
Yeah.
about electronics. In fact, I tell parents when they come in and they're mad at their child about electronics, I say, well, you're never going to win that battle. I mean, you're never going to get them to go, oh, you know what, Mom, you're right. I am spending too much time on electronics. But you might be able to get them to say, yeah, I probably should take showers,
Yeah.
or I probably should, exercise. Those kind of things they need to do because they're good for them. And that's where I put my emphasis. And if they're doing all those things and they want to play electronics, parents usually don't complain about that.
That's right. They
Right?
can't.
If they
I mean,
complain when they're staying up too late and they're
uh-huh.
not getting enough sleep and they're playing electronics. They're complaining when their homework isn't getting turned in and they're doing electronics. That's the issue. It's
Yeah.
the need tos. It's not the want to. That's the issue.
Well, so how do you, I mean, I guess how would you start that like let's say that somebody is watching this now and like they're like, "Wow, that's awesome." But how do you actually like start that conversation with your child if for like you haven't really been as, explicit in that? Like how would you recommend families start that conversation?
Well, it's much easier if you start young,
Right.
right? Your 2-year-old doesn't need any electronics. Let them play. They don't need to be in front of a tablet. They don't need to watch movies or those kind of things. Your 5-year-old maybe can watch a show or two when you're cooking dinner or you're using that time strategically. So you're setting that up. Now, most of the families that come into my office didn't do that.
Yes.
And now their child is spending 6, 7, 8 hours online and they're wondering, what do I do about that? And it is much harder. But we get back to that basic. We have basics. We have that conversation about, I'm not telling your son not to play electronics. In fact, I'm siding with the child. I'm happy if you play electronics. I just think it's important for your health or your education if you do some of these things that, your health, your body, your brain needs in order for you to get ready to be an adult someday.
Hmm. Do you have any advice, though, for families or parents who are really stressed out, frazzled, trying to do work from home, trying to figure out everybody else's schedules? And they're like, that's great, Dr. Korb, but like, I will sit and tell him that, but what about follow through?
Yeah. So first of all, try not to put too much pressure on yourself during the pandemic. These pandemics come about once every 100 years, and this has been a little crazy. So you know, uh, we lighten up the rules a little bit. With that being said, the more planful that a parent can be, the better, the easier this goes. So I recommend using schedules. So a
Mm-hmm.
schedule like, we're going to get up, we're going to do school from this time. We're all going to go exercise at this time. We're going to do art and creative play at this time. You've got free time at this time. You can do whatever you want during that free time, and they should get a lot of free time. We're
Uh-huh.
going to do something social. And if they're having trouble thinking of what they can do in those times, again, make lists. Let's come up with 25 social activities that you can come up with. Let's come up with a number of different exercises we can do. And make the day as scheduled and programmed as possible, especially for your younger ones. Now, the other thing to remember, and you know this, is what you're doing on electronics isn't all the same. All electronics are not created equal. So, if you're going online to look something up or you're learning how to code, that really isn't a problem.
Yeah.
But if you're scrolling through YouTube and TikTok and watching one video after the next, there's nothing good for your brain about that. It's kind of like eating ice cream. It's delicious, but if you did it all day, you're going to be a mess.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what that is. And most importantly, it's taking away from the things that we need to do in life. We need to be creative. We
Yeah.
need to exercise.
I'm envisioning eye rolls from teenagers right now that are like, you don't understand me. So, any advice about that scenario?
Yeah, I'm not telling them they can't do electronics.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
So
I
you're
don't
just
feel like,
saying,
I'm just saying, get some exercise.
yeah,
That's all I'm saying. And I think when I have those conversations, there's less eye rolls because I'm not trying to take away their electronics. I'm just trying to say you got to get sleep.
yeah.
Everybody needs sleep. Your brain will work better when you have sleep. You're better at playing games when you're rested. Whatever it is, you'll be better at it.
So, what is your kind of discussion with families about electronics and bedtime and concerns for like those blue light glasses, or are they needed? Do they work? What is?
So that's what um, the worries we have about electronics are a
Mm-hmm.
few. One is kids who use more electronics tend to be more obese, and we know all the problems that are associated with health and obesity. Kids who spend too much time on their phones tend to have eye damage.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, my laptop right now is probably 2.5 feet away from me. When you hold your phone about 12 inches from you, and your eyes have to really converge, and that puts strain on your eyes. So much so that even before the pandemic, China had a rule in their education system that said kids are not allowed to spend more than 20% of their school day online, and they're not to be given more than 20 minutes of online homework because they were worried about those causes. Now, then a pandemic happened, and now our kids are online all day, and then they're playing online all day. And so you can see how far we've come from really what are safe standards. So let's get back to sleep. Sleep's important. Kids need sleep. They need if they're teens, they're 8 to 10 hours of sleep, and younger kids more. And if they're not getting that, then you have to. It's your job to step in and protect them from themselves. Your job, number one, as a parent, is to keep your kids safe. And if they're not doing safe, healthy things, you have to step in and protect your kids.
Mm-hmm.
And that may mean removing electronics. That may mean turning them off at a certain time, turning off the internet. But ideally, you're not coming in as a policeman. You're coming in as, here's what we're trying to do to help you out, and you guys can work out a solution together.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it sounds like a lot of times, when you're seeing families in the office, it sounds like you're also trying to help them communicate to each other in more productive ways too.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And the reality is most kids aren't doing electronics because they want to. It's because there's nothing else they feel like they can do, and they just kind of get in the habit of it. It becomes this habit. It's not like they say, "Oh, I'm so excited to do this." Now, sometimes they're excited to join their friends and play a game, and that's cool because
Mm-hmm.
it's social and they're doing
Mm-hmm.
some of that. But most of the kids that are up at night are just doing it because they're bored and they don't know how to fall asleep.
Yeah. Yeah. Would you say that the same, and while I'm going to pause here for a second. So if you're watching now and you have some questions, these are sparking some questions or comments, please feel free to put them in there and I will make sure that we get the questions to Dr. Korb. So, having said that though, what would your advice be to families who at the beginning of the pandemic was like, oh my gosh, we have to stay locked down. There's nothing else for my child to do. And I guess I'm okay with the fact that they're doing this and being social online. But now that, things that we're here a year later. Uh, do you give her parents permission to have that ability to walk back? And how do I mean, I think that's where the struggle is now for a
I
lot of
wrote
my families.
I wrote an article about a year ago, right when we started, that got very popular because I hit it at the right time, called "Parenting in a Pandemic,"
Mm-hmm.
and basically I said then that it's important to have structure and routines and schedules and all these family time and all these things that are important. Um, but not everybody read that article and not everybody followed that article. And I think those same rules and the same standards apply. You have to get structure back in your house during times of uncertainty, which this
Mm-hmm.
pandemic truly has been. It's important to have certainty. The constancy, knowing that you'll always be there for your child, is so valuable to their development. The constancy, knowing that they're going to have rules and boundaries, is so important to their child. And if you're finding, gosh, your child is bored, then you're going to have to help them be creative. You're
Mm-hmm.
going to think of scavenger hunts that they can do with their friends online, or hikes that your family can take, things that you guys can do to break up the monotony of this uncertainty.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the most creative things that you've seen or that you've even suggested to combat like social isolation now that we're a year into this, you
Yeah, no,
know?
I'd be interested. You're so creative, Marissa, that I'd be interested in your opinion. But one of my patients did, what did they do? Freaky Friday. And every Friday they would have to come to dinner dressed up as another family member.
Oh, how fun.
And I thought that was great. And
Yeah.
I mentioned scavenger hunts because some of my patients have done that, where one parent will put together a list of 25 things. They'll all get online and they'll hold the list up, and their kids are running back and forth all around the house, getting things, matching, going back and looking at the list, and it's fun to see just the craziness that happens.
Yeah, it's so great. Yeah, we have in our household, my daughter is into musical theater. And as you know, we're a year in, so both my kids have had birthdays without the traditional fanfare. But my daughter, we ended up having a virtual murder mystery party.
Mm,
Where at with her friends, they got to get characters and cast, and then they dressed up. So that was a lot of fun.
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, so to just bring in some of those ideas.
Yeah, some creativity, and it's good to have things to look forward to.
Yeah.
Whether it's just we're going to do movie nights every Friday night together and order pizza, or we're going to go to the beach at the end of the month, or whatever it is. So, I'm in California, I can go to the beach.
I
um,
know. We can't.
yeah, you can go somewhere. I don't know, you can figure that out. But some adventure that you guys can look forward to, and it doesn't have to be a big expensive ordeal, but just it breaks up the monotony of what these kids are doing because they're in their rooms all day.
Yeah, that's so important. I mean, self-care right now is so key. I remember we weren't even that far in. It was like last summer and early in the summer where we decided we were going to rent a VRBO house, which was private and there was nobody for miles around and we could bring our dogs. So it was perfect. But the change in just scenery and something to look forward to really made a difference. So,
Right, right.
yeah.
My kids were so excited at Christmas time when we spent 6 hours driving to people's houses, just in locally, and just dropping presents on their doorstep.
Oh,
Right, and then we didn't have any social contact, but just it was just getting out of the house and doing something that was exciting for them.
yeah. Before I turn it over to some questions, could you comment on, it's interesting, especially these what we just talked about and thinking about children's ages and especially the older kids. We talked about how there is a time when teenagers are like, I'm done hanging out with you. So, what advice do you have for parents to reconnect with their adolescent who is just like, I've been with you for a long time. I just want to hang out in my room.
So first of all, don't take it personally. That's part of normal adolescence, is to push away from their parents and discover who they are, to find their own individual self. And that's why the groups and the clubs and all those things that they're involved in is so important, because it's helping them form their identity. We
Hmm.
want kids to be trying new things. But the struggle with the pandemic is sports are shut down, and jobs aren't available, and all these things that we would have them do, all these activities, they're not able to do. So we have to be creative, and we have to work with our kids to find opportunities for them to explore new interests, whether it's mowing lawns at the neighbors' houses to make some money, or starting a coin collection, or doing volunteer work together.
Uh-huh.
Sewing masks was great at the beginning of the pandemic. Just things that we can do to teach a new skill, and expand their horizon, so they can get that exploration opportunity that they would be doing on their own.
Yeah. I mean, and you point out a good thing is that, despite the pandemic, if there's any positive thing about it, is that we have had much more family time and time to just kind of explore and nurture those additional interests,
Absolutely. And the
hobbies.
data supports that. I mean, the
Yeah.
data says that the majority of kids said they're closer to their parents now than they were a year ago.
Hmm.
The majority of kids are going to bed at an earlier time than they were before the pandemic. Um, so there are kids that are stressed out. You have to look at your own individual child situation, because everyone's different. But for many kids, there are some silver linings to this.
Yeah. Well, there is a question here from Becca. Thank you, Becca, for submitting a question. What if you, as the parent, aren't organized by nature, and where can one start?
I am sorry, I turned it off and I turned that back on. What if the parents aren't organized by nature? And
And
where
where,
where can we start?
yeah.
What if the So that's a great question. It's the number one question I get no matter where I speak. And by the way, you have very cute kids. The the First, you play to your strengths, right? Some people may not be sequentially organized, but they may be very spatially organized. I'm very good at keeping a neat house and showing order that way, but I may have some trouble with time management. In that case, what you do is you show that you're trying. You show the value of being organized, that you value it, and that you're working to get better at it. And you show them your struggle and the strategies that you use to implement it. Yeah, none of us are perfect at organization, but I'm sure we all have strengths and weaknesses. Play to your strengths and show that you're working on your weaknesses.
What do you mean by show them? Like actually
I use
say it out
lists.
loud?
I use
Or,
lists all the time because I can't remember things. And I'll say to my kids, you know what, guys, if you just tell me this and we don't write it down, I might not remember it, because I need that organization, that
uh,
it's all written down.
hmm.
That's okay. But it's also showing what you're saying is really important. I really want to record it. I want to get it done. It just got to be written down.
Yeah.
And
I
so you're
love,
showing the strategies you're
yeah.
using.
Yeah, I love that. And it sort of brings them into that brainstorming. Like, oh, well, maybe we could do this or maybe we could do that. So, and it helps them feel, sort of part of the solution there. So that's great. So hopefully, Becca, that answered your question. If you have any others, please let us know. So related to that, with executive functioning, um, oftentimes there is that question of, well, is uh, is this mean that kids will have struggles, all the way into college and lifelong. And how, I mean,
Mm.
I think some parents are very overwhelmed
Hmm.
by thinking that they might have to do so much for their kids and knowing how to pull away and feel okay with that. Do you have any words for that?
So we know that the executive functions, this prefrontal cortex, is the last part of your brain to develop.
Mm-hmm.
It continues to grow until we're about 25, 26, 27, somewhere around there. So there are plenty of kids that are just late bloomers. There's a lot of parents that really worry about their kids not being ready for college. And I sometimes say, you're right. we're not there yet.
Yeah.
Um, but the solution for those kids is to not do everything for them, because I've seen too many cases where parents have smart kids, but who are organizationally very young and they do everything they can to get them into a good college, and the kids are home in 6 or 9 months because they failed out. Um, you have to push your kids at their level, and you have to be honest with yourselves about where they're at, realizing that this will continue to progress over time.
So there's that balance between doing too much for your child and allowing them that independence to just be okay to fail if they need be, but to learn from that.
One of the stories I write about in the book Raising an Organized Child is about a father who would drive 2.5 hours to his son's college on Tuesday to wake him up so he could get to class. And then he would sleep in the dorm room between the two roommates on the floor from Tuesday to Thursday to make sure he got to class Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then he would drive back home. That kid didn't make it. But that was an example of a family that did everything they could to get him there. And once he was there, they were doing everything they could to keep him there, but the child wasn't ready.
Wow. Wow. All right. Well, parents.
Don't sleep in your child's dorm room.
If
you heard anything today, don't sleep in your child's dorm room.
All right. Well, we have a comment here from Amy. So I like the explicit talk about these are the things you need to learn to do to become an adult, and I'll help you learn each step. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right, Amy. I mean, I think that, and you may not even say, you may not even have to clarify. You can know that this is to help them be an adult. You can just say these are the things that are really important. Some kids will want to hear to be an adult. Other kids will say, well, I don't want to be an adult. But the important thing is these are the kind of things that you need in order to grow up and learn and be competent with.
Yeah. Well, here's another question from Kathy. How do you balance providing executive function support and allowing for independence and growth? This is kind of what we were talking about. So, especially for kids who are significantly behind in executive function.
This is a great question. So, I think the best tool to teach kids how to be problem solvers, step 5 in the book, is to let them to be creative and to foster their imagination. You know, so much of we learn about planning and solving problems is through that creative play when we're young. What would I do if I was a princess and I saw a frog? What would I do if I was a cow and there were 4 kids sneaking up on me in the middle of the night? What would I do? You know, what you have to understand things conceptually and use your imagination and plan and put yourself in different positions or perspectives when you're pretending. So it's really exercising that 2 parts of your brain at a time. The other thing you do is you encourage kids to learn to have their own voice. And there's a couple things that are really important there. One, they have to not feel discouraged by you in order to do that. You have to show interest in them. But for example, if my son was on a basketball team and wasn't getting enough playing time, and he comes to me and says, Dad, the coach isn't playing me enough. And I might say, yeah, it kind of looks like that. And then I would say, well, what are you going to do about it? Because I could go to the coach and say, how come you're not playing my son?
Right.
And maybe my son would get to play more. But it would be so much more valuable for my son to learn to go to the coach and say, what do I have to do to play more? Yeah. What do I have to do to earn more playing time? And even if he doesn't get more playing time, or he does, 5th grade basketball, how much playing time has very little influence on the rest of his life. But the ability to speak up for yourself, that's a lesson that will be powerful for their entire life.
Absolutely.
So encourage your child to do the things that are within their power and realize that, yeah, they might be disorganized or messy or lose things. And in those areas, give them some scaffolding, help them out.
I love that. And, I think I was kind of imagining that scenario and you're like, well, what are you going to do about it? And then they look at you. Right? But that's the opportunity, right? You could say, well, so what are some of the ideas?
What are some options, right?
Yeah. That's great. Brainstorming.
Exactly.
We have another comment here from Amy. Oh, so we need baby steps with screen time. So she really liked using the H's as a checklist to explain priorities.
Absolutely. It's when you've let things go too far, it is much harder to dial it back. You know, we're seeing this term that didn't exist, the screen addiction that didn't exist 10 years ago. And there truly are kids that get addicted. Anything that is really rewarding to your brain, and they're designed to be rewarding to your brains, can be addicting. So it is a careful walk back that you have to do. And And I don't think you can win the argument if you make it about electronics.
Can you, since you brought up screen addiction, can you explain to viewers, like, when would you be concerned as a developmental behavioral pediatrician that you are sort of on that edge or you are looking at a child at risk for or already addicted to screens? Because I think parents will throw that around. You're getting addicted to screens,
Yeah,
right?
that's a good
But,
point.
right? So
I
how do you
think
distinguish that?
when you have an addiction, it interferes with your life.
Hmm.
So that's kind of the basis of these four H's and S. If it's interfering with your health, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And if it's interfering with your health and you show that to them and you explain it and they still can't do anything about it, that's a problem.
Hmm.
If it's interfering with the things that they used to like to do, like hang out with their friends and be social, that's a problem.
Hmm.
If it's interfering with relationships, that's a problem. So, you know, and if you can't even shower and get out of bed because you're so hooked to your games, those things are problems. So if we go through that route of the four H's and we're not getting somewhere, they don't, they that means nothing to them. That's when I'm getting concerned and we need to seek help.
Yeah, I mean, so many times some kids complain about, well, I have to get on, I'm going to lose my streak, or
Uh-huh.
right? And parents are like, oh, they're just sort of like, well,
Well, that's
sorry.
that. I like to use that as an opportunity to plan. If you know that your game doesn't save,
Yes,
don't start it 10 minutes before your deadline, right? That's a planning problem.
yes,
And so we use that as an opportunity to really talk about planning. What time do you need to start in order to be able to get through a level?
yep.
And maybe we can make your time a little longer, but you can never run over, and really help them figure out how to plan and be more forward thinking. One of the things I loved when DVRs came out
Uh-huh.
is you could say to your child, yes, you can watch a show. Because before, when they're watching TV, the commercial comes and it just bleeds into the next show. But now with a DVR, it's recorded, the show's over, it's 22 minutes, and then they're
Done.
they're done.
Yeah. I love that. It's funny. That just sort of brought up a funny anecdote, which probably is a tangent from this. But we were watching a couple of years ago one of the theater live shows that they were doing, like,
Mm-hmm.
and all of a sudden there was commercials, and my daughter was like, let's fast forward. I'm like, no, we can't. Like, we just can't do that. This is how it used to be.
Right.
She's like, ah. Anyway, so I have another thought here. As far as like executive functions, we're talking a lot about what parents can do at home. But what advice do you have to parents who want to partner with schools? Like, so that your child has executive functioning deficits and you want to advocate for your child. Do you have any strategies or advice on how to best partner with a school, with a teacher?
So I think this is a really important discussion. I think there is a secret oath that middle school teachers make that say, I'm going to get everybody ready for high school,
Uh huh.
no matter what. And they're going to be organized and independent. And some kids developmentally just aren't there. So it really is important to have a conversation. If somebody was, and I truly do see 13-year-olds with the organizational skills of 8-year-olds all the time. If somebody was a 13-year-old with the reading skills of an 8-year-old, they would be getting all kinds of interventions at school. Or if the math skills of an 8-year-old, they'd be getting all kinds of interventions. But these executive dysfunctions are silent. Teachers don't totally see it, and they get masqueraded as being lazy.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is, if you can point out where your child's organization is, then maybe you can work with the school to come up with appropriate accommodations. Things like, somebody needs to make sure that he writes down his homework, or
Yeah.
you need to use, all the teachers, you need to use the same online scheduling tool, so we're not jumping from one tool to the next trying to figure out what homework is.
Mm-hmm.
um, or teachers can use, in the elementary schools, 5 minutes at the end of the day for kids to pack up and get ready to go home, and because kids leave and they leave everything they need at school.
Mm-hmm.
So you can do that, but you have to really explain what you're seeing and really talk about the level of where this child's at,
Right.
because I don't think that's instinctive in the school system yet.
Yeah, I think your comment that sometimes and that parents hear or they're worried that the school may perceive their child as being lazy, right? And I think that sort of comes up a lot. Like, I don't want my child to be known that way. He's struggling, and I just don't know how to communicate that. Do you find that you mentioned middle school, that transition to middle school? Are there similar supports, or do you find that teachers and schools are just as helpful for kids as they transition to high school or even into college? Or are there similar programs that parents might want to think about?
So it really depends on the teacher, and it
Mm,
depends on the school and the program. Um, I don't think there's systems that are automatically great at this, but there are some schools that are wonderful at this. Um, there are clearly colleges that have learning support systems built into them, knowing that some students aren't ready. Um, that's not Stanford,
hmm.
right? That's not Harvard. But there are schools like Landmark School that are really designed for kids who may have some organizational learning difficulties. So certainly the systems exist, but it often takes a lot of conversation to really find that right level of support. And again, that's what my book is about, is really trying to help people figure out where their child is at so that
Hmm.
they can push them, but at
Yeah,
their level.
yeah. It looks like we have another question. Oh, we have a couple. So, from Kathy, regarding a 14-year-old with the skills of an 8-year-old, etc., how do you assess where your child is developmentally with executive functioning? Is it on a task by task basis or on a more like general or global level?
So there aren't great tests of executive function. Psychologists use some tests like the NEPSI or the brief that give us some information, but I think the real life observations are the best measure of how your executive functioning is. So, we can, and again, you can use the 5 steps to kind of think about categories of organization, but how is my child at order, beginning, middle, and an end? How are they at space? Do they know where things are? Do they lose things? Can they clean their room when they have to, or does everything just get piled in a drawer?
Hmm.
Um, does my child think ahead, plan? Do they anticipate? We didn't talk about this, but so much of behavior has to do with these executive functions, because uh, behavior happens when my expectations aren't met. And if I'm a really lousy anticipator, if I don't anticipate a natural outcome, like we're going to have dinner at 6 o'clock and I start my game at 5:45, and then I'm frustrated when my parents say it's time to turn off the game, um, then I have meltdowns and behavioral issues. So are they lousy at anticipating and thinking ahead? And can they make inferences and problem solve and do those things for themselves? Um, and again, I talk about that developmentally, where kids are at in the book, but it's the observations that you make of your child's natural development.
Hmm. Great. Um, Amy, again, I'm an audiobook versus a print book person. I alternate between my e-library and Audible to find titles, but so many of these types of books are print only, and I feel like I miss out on things. Any suggestions? Is there another source for audiobooks?
My book is on audiobook. um, the a nice guy read it for me. And
You
yeah,
didn't
yeah. I mean
read it
that.
yourself.
I'm not sure, but my publishers thought it would be better if somebody else read my book, and I'm assuming they know what they're doing. Um, so yeah, so that book is available. Narissa, you do book clubs all the time. Do you
Yep.
have books that are on audiobook that you recommend?
For this type of
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of just depends, right? So there's lots of books out there, but I always look at the library on Libby. I use that a lot as well. And then the Kindle. So, oh, yep, she says yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Caitlin says, what verbiage can I use both with parent hat and teacher hat when I see my child or my student gazing or appearing like they are daydreaming and not attending to a task?
Oh, good one.
Um, she said, I have tried. I notice your eyes looking away from your paper. Can you share with me the thoughts you are thinking?
Hmm. I guess
Um,
it depends on what age your child is there.
it looks like she has. Oh, or I notice you might be distracted. Do you need my help or do you got it? I notice this is a side door way of getting a few back to completing the work.
So it's interesting because that kind of phrase for a 5-year-old could be really useful. If somebody said that to me at work, I would be really annoyed and offended. So you have to be very careful at what age you're using that.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Yeah,
uh,
she
you
says
know,
elementary.
right.
Yeah.
The first thing to think about is, how long is your child's attention span? Because if your child is a 9-minute kid and you're having them sit there for 20 minutes, you're going to be saying that every day constantly. If your child's a 9-minute kid, they need to get up and do jumping jacks every 9 minutes and then get back to work, or they need to go jump on the trampoline, or they need to, go get a glass of water. So you have to really know where your child's at, and then your goal becomes 10 minutes. What are the interval training we need to do at 9 minutes in order to get us to the 10-minute level? So it becomes more of an exercise that we're building their attention span as opposed to just reminding them to focus.
And she did clarify second to fifth grade. So yeah, perfect. So any other questions for Dr. Korb before we wrap it up? I'll let you have a few seconds if you're thinking any burning questions while we've got him here before he has to run off onto something else.
Patience.
Patience, that's right. Here we go. She did want to say, I work at a school with an amygdala reset room.
Interesting.
So sensory is definitely a part of it.
That's interesting. Yeah. So it's an amygdala reset. So that's the mood center.
Yeah.
So they let them go to take care of their emotions. That's great.
I love it. One more question, Dr. Korb. So from Becca, my son is very strong-willed and usually doesn't like my first attempts at setting up a schedule. I try to involve him as much as I can, but he often pushes back, wants to be in charge on his own. So I work on letting him choose, but then maybe the schedule doesn't work out well. How can I have that conversation with my son in a positive way?
Okay. So good that you're using a schedule. And you're right, life happens. And sometimes it doesn't always go the way it planned. So one of the strategies I use is a ticket system, where if I'm driving in the car and we're going to McDonald's, we're not going to McDonald's, but if we were going to McDonald's, I realize, oh my gosh, we don't have time. We have to go to the dry cleaners and pick something up. I hand my son a pretend ticket. And my son knows that means there's going to be a change in plans. And so in a minute, I'm going to tell them the change in plans. But what I've done is I've given them some prep time.
Yep.
And then when the change in plans comes, if he handles it, he knows he can keep that pretend ticket, hand it back to me at bedtime, and I give him a little prize. A shell I found on the beach, a new toothbrush, something. But it's an opportunity to say, yeah, you are really flexible. I love the way you did that. But it also is recognizing that, uncertainty happens. But what I'm doing is, back to consistency, step one, is I'm handling change in plans, unpredictability, in a consistent, predictable way, which makes it easier for my child.
That was gold. Thank you so much. Yes, so Amy said thank you both, and Becca said love that. So wonderful. Wow, guys, that was great. So, and then yes, this is available. Do not worry, Lori. Do not worry. If you're just joining now, it's on my YouTube channel, and I will send it out in a blast on my blog newsletter. So, yes. Any other questions? I think we're kind of getting close. Just going to give you a couple more seconds. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and let you guys know that next week's special guest will be Stephanie Drury, owner and founder of Sprouts Cooking School, where we're going to talk healthy eating and cooking with kids. So I am not seeing any additional questions. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Korb. Always a pleasure. I am so excited that you made time to spend here with us. And again, if you haven't actually seen the book, available on audiobook, yes, yep. Hold on. There's a couple more. These are thanks. So thank you so much for answering. Much appreciated. And also a thank you. So thank you guys for coming and watching. And another thank you.
Great.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to end the show, guys. And again, remember, this will be available as a replay. So if you have any suggestions for future topics or guests, please make sure to reach out to me at letstalkkidshealth@gmail.com. Drop me a message down below or anywhere on social media that I am. And remember, consider subscribing to my YouTube channel, Narissa Bauer MD, to be alerted when I go live each week, or follow my blog Facebook page. All right. Thanks again.